Hidden trade routes once turned vast deserts into global marketplaces. This journey uncovers the lost economic networks that linked vanished kingdoms, revealing how ancient commerce built civilizations you have likely never heard of. You will discover how secret paths through the sand moved more than just goods. They carried the ideas and technologies that shaped our world. How did a kingdom flourish in the heart of the Sahara, only to disappear without a trace? And what legendary city of pillars was swallowed by the dunes for its greed? The answers lie in understanding these forgotten connections. What does it truly mean for a civilization to be lost? Think of ancient trade not as a simple swap of goods, but as the central nervous system of a vast, living organism. This was a world built on intricate webs of credit and profound trust between cultures who might never meet. Caravans did not just carry sacks of spices and blocks of salt. They moved on currents of advanced knowledge, navigating by the stars and reading the subtle signs of the desert that were invisible to the untrained eye. This system allowed distant kingdoms to thrive by specializing, one civilization perfecting the art of glassmaking because it trusted another hundreds of miles away to provide its food. This deep interdependence created a world far more connected than our modern maps might suggest. How could such a delicate and complex network survive the harsh realities of a shifting desert? The answer lies in the incredible adaptations of the people who made these routes their home. That vast desert was not an empty void but a pulsating artery of commerce. The Sahara functioned as a sea of sand with caravans of camels acting as its great ships. These were not small, wandering groups but organized fleets, sometimes comprising thousands of animals, moving in disciplined lines across the dunes. They followed precise, well-established routes etched into the landscape by countless journeys. One of the most famous of these was the path from Sijilmassa in the north, a bustling gateway city, all the way south to the legendary Timbuktu. The cargo these caravans carried was the lifeblood of empires. They transported slabs of vital salt from mines in the heart of the desert, bars of gold from the lush river valleys of the south, intricate textiles, and other precious goods. Controlling this flow of wealth required an intimate knowledge of the desert that few possessed. This is where the Tuareg people, often called the Lords of the Desert, enter our story. They were the undisputed masters of this environment. For them, the Sahara was not a barrier but a homeland. They served as the essential guides for these massive caravans, reading the stars and the subtle shifts in the sand to navigate safely. Their power was so immense that they controlled access to the critical salt mines at places like Taghaza, where the very ground was made of valuable salt blocks. Through their expertise, the Sahara became a bridge, seamlessly connecting the Mediterranean world with the powerful West African empires of Ghana and later Mali. The gold that financed grand palaces and the salt that preserved food for entire cities moved along these invisible highways, proving that what looks like a wasteland on a map was, in reality, the foundation for some of history's most magnificent kingdoms. But the Sahara was not the only desert shaping global history. Far to the east, the legendary Silk Road also carved its path through a sea of sand. While we often picture this route winding through green mountain valleys, its desert sections were just as vital to its success. The Taklamakan Desert in Central Asia presents a landscape of such extreme peril that its very name carries an ominous warning, often translated as the place of no return. To avoid this deadly interior, the Silk Road split into northern and southern branches, clinging to the edges of this vast desert basin. It was here, in these narrow, life-giving ribbons of green, that legendary oasis cities thrived. Places like Kashgar and Dunhuang did not merely exist, they flourished as glittering hubs of civilization. They provided the only reliable sources of water, shelter, and bustling markets for the endless stream of merchants, pilgrims, and scholars moving between China and the West. These cities became incredible melting pots where the world's great traditions met and merged. The chants of Buddhist monks echoed from cave temples. The calls to prayer from mosques filled the air, and Nestorian Christians placed their crosses in the sand, all within the same thriving urban centers. The ruins of these cities have yielded a breathtaking treasure trove of our shared past. Ancient manuscripts written in a dozen lost languages and artifacts from every corner of the known world show us the true cargo of these caravans. They carried more than just silk and spices. They transported entire systems of faith, philosophy, and scientific knowledge across the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. This relentless exchange of ideas through the desert proves that these routes were not just economic corridors, but the very arteries of human civilization. Deep in the heart of the Libyan desert, a kingdom once flourished against impossible odds. The Garamantes were not mere desert nomads, they were master engineers who turned the Sahara green. Their secret lay beneath the burning sands, a vast and complex network of underground tunnels known as the Fagara. These tunnels were not simple wells, they were monumental feats of hydraulic engineering, carved for miles to tap into ancient fossil water reserves that had lain undisturbed for millennia. This was a civilization that literally mined water from the past to fuel its future. With this life-giving resource, they transformed barren patches of desert into a thriving agricultural heartland, growing grapes, figs, and wheat where only sand should have existed. This mastery over their environment did more than just feed their people. It positioned them as the indispensable middlemen in a sprawling trade network. They connected the rich, sub-Saharan cultures to the south with the powerful Roman Empire to the north. Goods like ivory, gold, and exotic animals flowed through their hands, making their capital cities vibrant centers of commerce and culture. They built fortified towns and lived a life of sophistication that rivaled their Mediterranean contemporaries. So how could such a powerful and ingenious civilization simply vanish from history? The answer is as stark as the desert itself. The very resource that gave them life, the ancient fossil water, was not infinite. After centuries of relentless use, the wells began to run dry. The Fagara system slowly silted up and failed. As the water disappeared, so too did the green fields, and with them, the kingdom's reason for being. The Garamantes, who had so brilliantly defied the desert, were ultimately reclaimed by it, leaving behind their silent, sand-blown cities as a haunting monument to human ingenuity and its limits. Their story forces us to ask a profound question. What does it mean for a civilization to be truly sustainable when its greatest triumph contains the very seeds of its own downfall? While the Garamantes mastered water, another desert civilization unlocked wealth from the dry bark of a tree. The true treasure of ancient Arabia was not gold or jewels, but the aromatic sap of scraggly trees that grew only in its southern reaches. Frankincense and myrrh, these precious resins, were more valuable than gold in the ancient world, fueling an economic network so powerful it built legendary kingdoms from the sands. To understand their worth, you have to think of them not as simple perfumes, but as the absolute necessities of ancient spiritual and social life. From the temples of Egypt to the courts of Babylon and the forums of Rome, these fragrant resins were essential. They were burned in vast quantities during religious ceremonies, their smoke carrying prayers to the heavens. They were used in embalming the dead, and they served as the ultimate symbol of luxury and elite status. Without them, the rituals that held empires together would have literally lost their sacred scent. This immense demand created one of history's most lucrative and carefully guarded trade monopolies. The entire supply came from a limited region in modern-day Oman and Yemen, where the frankincense trees thrived in the desert climate. Controlling this source meant controlling a river of wealth, and the kingdom of Saba, the very land of the Queen of Sheba, rose to legendary status by doing exactly that. The Sabaeans did not just harvest the resin, they mastered every step of the journey. They cultivated the trees, protected the routes, and dictated the terms of trade to the entire known world. The incense was transported along a grueling network of camel trails known as the incense route. These paths stretched over 1,000 miles, winding up the length of the Arabian Peninsula, from the lush highlands of the south to the bustling markets of Gaza on the Mediterranean coast. This was not a journey for the faint of heart. Caravans of thousands of camels, each animal carrying heavy loads of resin, had to navigate searing deserts, avoid bandits, and pay tolls to a series of middlemen kingdoms that controlled the oases along the way. The Nabateans, who carved their magnificent city of Petra from rose-red cliffs, grew immensely powerful by controlling the northern terminus of this route. They taxed the precious cargo before it moved on to Egypt, Greece, and Rome. This intricate system wove the seemingly isolated deserts of Arabia directly into the political and economic fabric of the ancient world's greatest empires. The Roman Empire, for instance, spent a fortune on Arabian incense, and historical records even complain about the vast sums of silver flowing south to pay for it. The entire region's destiny was shaped by the scent of burning resin, proving that the most powerful connections can sometimes be carried on the wind. Far to the east, another desert shaped a different kind of power. The vast, wind-swept Gobi was the domain of the Xiongnu, a formidable confederation of nomadic tribes whose strength flowed from the saddle. Their empire was built on mobility and a mastery of the arid landscape that their settled neighbors could scarcely comprehend. For the mighty Han dynasty in China, the Xiongnu were not just a nuisance, they were an existential threat, a constant pressure on their northern frontier. But this power was not sustained by raiding alone. The true source of the Xiongnu's influence was their stranglehold on the early trade routes that skirted the treacherous Gobi. They positioned themselves as the essential and unchallengeable middlemen in a lucrative exchange. They controlled the flow of Chinese silk westward, and in return, they funneled the things they and China coveted most back eastward: powerful Central Asian horses, precious jade, and other exotic goods. This control over the desert's edge made them rich and powerful, and it was a problem the Han Emperor who decided he could no longer tolerate. His solution was not merely a military one, it was a desperate, brilliant gamble into the unknown. He dispatched a court official named Zhang Qian on a diplomatic mission with a seemingly simple goal: to travel west beyond the domains of the Xiongnu and find potential allies against them. Zhang Qian's journey was a monumental trial. He was captured by the Xiongnu and held for 10 years, yet he eventually escaped and pressed onward, reaching the sophisticated courts of Central Asia. While he failed in his primary diplomatic mission to forge a grand alliance, the intelligence he brought back to China was priceless. He described the wealthy kingdoms and their desire for Chinese goods, revealing a world of opportunity that lay beyond the hostile Xiongnu. This knowledge ignited a new strategy for the Han. Instead of trying to defeat the Xiongnu head-on, they would go around them. The Chinese began to actively forge direct relationships with the western regions, establishing protected trade corridors and military outposts. This deliberate, state-sponsored effort to circumvent their nomadic rivals did something extraordinary. It effectively formalized and secured the Silk Road. A struggle for control over desert trade routes, born from a need to counter a nomadic empire, ended up throwing open the doors to centuries of cross-cultural exchange. The very existence of the Silk Road as we know it was, in many ways, an unintended consequence of a desert power struggle. Gold from the kingdoms of West Africa did more than glitter, it fundamentally reshaped the world's economy. The empires of Ghana and later Mali were built upon geological fortunes so vast that their rulers were legendary for their wealth. Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, became the richest person in history not by hoarding his gold, but by spending it, and his famous pilgrimage to Mecca in the 14th century famously flooded the markets of Cairo with so much gold that its value plummeted for over a decade. This incredible supply met an insatiable demand from the north. North Africa and Europe, with their silver-based currencies and growing economies, desperately needed gold to mint their own powerful coins, the dinars and bezants that would fuel trade from the Mediterranean to the Middle East. This created a perfect storm of commerce across the Sahara. The south had endless gold but lacked a simple, vital resource, salt. In the tropical climates of West Africa, salt was not just a seasoning, it was essential for preserving food and replacing nutrients lost through constant perspiration. And the Sahara held mountains of it. At remote, blistering hot mines like Tag Hazer, slaves cut great slabs of salt from the earth. This was the simple, profound logic of the trade, a pound of salt for a pound of gold. Think of the caravans, the great ships of the desert, moving south laden with these crystalline blocks and returning north carrying the gold that would finance empires. This flow of bullion was the lifeblood of a connected world. The gold that left West Africa did not just vanish, it paid for the construction of soaring mosques and universities in cities like Timbuktu and Djenné, fostering a cultural golden age of scholarship and art. Simultaneously, that very same gold, once minted into coins in North African cities like Fez and Cairo, financed the Renaissance in Italy, funded crusades, and built the merchant fleets of Venice and Genoa. A single trade route crossing the most formidable desert on Earth became the invisible financial engine for two continents, proving that value is never just about the object itself, but about the desperate need of someone, somewhere, on the other side of the sand. These oases were the beating hearts of the entire desert trade system. Imagine a city like Palmyra rising from the stark emptiness of the Syrian desert. It was not just a place to find water, it was a dazzling metropolis of columned streets and grand temples, a nerve center for finance and culture. Here, a merchant from Rome could arrange a line of credit with a banker from Persia, using a letter that would be honored in a market 1,000 miles away. These cities offered secure warehouses where goods like Chinese silk or Indian spices could be stored safely, and bustling markets where they could be sold or traded. The rulers of these oasis kingdoms grew immensely wealthy not from farming but from a simple, brilliant strategy. They provided the one thing every caravan desperately needed: guaranteed safety. In return, they taxed every single item that moved through their gates. This flow of wealth paid for monumental architecture and art that reflected the entire known world. A temple in Palmyra might display elements of Greek, Roman, and Persian design, all fused into a unique local style. Walking through its streets, you would hear a dozen languages and see the fashions of distant empires. These cities were living proof that the desert was not a barrier, but a catalyst for a new kind of global culture, born from the constant flow of people and ideas. They challenge our very idea of isolation, showing that the most remote and inhospitable places can become the world's greatest crossroads. The same ingenuity that charted paths across the sand also looked to the horizon where the desert met the sea. While camel caravans moved goods through the heart of the deserts, a parallel network of maritime routes flourished along their sun-baked fringes. the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf became liquid highways, allowing merchants to bypass the most treacherous stretches of the Arabian interior entirely. This was a system of brilliant logistical adaptation, connecting the Mediterranean world directly with the vast markets of the Indian Ocean. On the Egyptian coast of the Red Sea, the port of Berenice hummed with international activity. Ships arriving from distant India and the vibrant coasts of East Africa would unload their precious cargoes here. Think of the scene, the docks crowded with sacks of black pepper from the Malabar coast, gleaming pearls from the Persian Gulf, and delicate Chinese silks that had already traveled thousands of miles. But the journey was not over. These goods then faced a final, critical leg, transported on the backs of donkeys and camels along cleared desert tracks to the waiting barges on the Nile River. From there, they would flow north to Alexandria and out to the rest of the Roman Empire. This seamless combination of sea and land travel created a comprehensive supply chain that was astonishingly efficient. A merchant in Rome could enjoy spices from a land he could not even conceive of, all because of this interlocked system of desert tracks and ocean routes. It demonstrates that ancient traders were not bound by a single method. They were masters of mixed logistics, using every tool at their disposal to move the world's riches. The deserts were not just crossed, they were cleverly circumvented, proving that the will to connect will always find a way, whether by sea, how, or by dromedary. The desert demands not just strength but cleverness. The Nabateans understood this better than anyone, building a kingdom not by conquering the land, but by listening to it. Their hidden capital, Petra, was a masterclass in strategic defense and survival. Approaching it, a traveler would see only an impenetrable wall of rose-red rock. The entrance was a secret, a deep, narrow fissure in the cliff face called the Sick. This was not a grand gateway, but a twisting canyon, so slender in places that only a few people could walk abreast. For any army, it would have been a death trap. For the Nabateans, it was a perfect, natural fortress. But a fortress needs more than strong walls, it needs water, and this was their true genius. In a region where rain was a rare and violent event, they became masters of every single drop. They carved channels into the towering cliffs of the Sick, lining them with waterproof cement to guide the flash floods into a vast network of cisterns and reservoirs. They did not just store water, they controlled its entire journey, turning destructive deluges into a reliable, life-giving supply for thousands of people. This hydraulic mastery meant that within this hidden canyon, they could support a thriving metropolis with gardens, baths, and bustling markets, all while their enemies withered in the surrounding deserts. Their power, however, was not rooted in the rock alone, but in their position on the map. Petra sat at the perfect crossroads. It was the crucial northern hub for the incense route, the final stop where the precious cargo of frankincense and myrrh was taxed before being shipped to the Mediterranean. Caravans also brought silks from the east and spices from the south, all funneled through the narrow Sick where the Nabateans held absolute control. Their wealth was not mined from the earth, but levied from the endless flow of commerce. This made them incredibly rich and influential for a time. Their independence rested on a delicate balance, controlling a trade that greater empires increasingly desired. When the Roman Empire turned its full attention to the region, it saw the Nabatean monopoly not as a partnership, but as an obstacle. The Romans did not need to storm the Sick with legions, they simply shifted the trade. They developed new maritime routes and annexed the kingdom, redirecting the flow of wealth into their own coffers. Almost overnight, the reason for Petra's existence vanished. The caravans stopped coming. The ingenious water channels, with no one to maintain them, slowly silted up and fell silent. the city that had been carved from the rock with such breathtaking ambition was gradually reclaimed by it, a stunning monument to a simple, brutal truth. In the desert, a kingdom can be built on the control of a single route, and it can fade just as quickly when that route changes course. The real treasure moving along those desert tracks was never just gold or silk, but something far more transformative, the very blueprint of civilization itself. These trade routes were the world's first internet, a sprawling network where data traveled not in bits and bytes, but in the form of beliefs, inventions, and art. A merchant traveling from Rome to China did more than transport goods. He was a living vessel, carrying with him the ideas of his homeland and absorbing those of every oasis city he visited. This constant, slow-motion collision of cultures reshaped humanity in ways we are still unraveling today. Among the most profound exchanges was the movement of faith. Buddhism, born in India, did not cross the jagged Himalayas on its own. It traveled peacefully with monks and pilgrims along the Silk Road, its calming doctrines resonating in the bustling markets of Central Asia. From there, it seeped into China and later Korea and Japan, carried on the same currents of commerce that brought silk and spices. In the other direction, Christianity found its way deep into Asia. Nestorian Christians established thriving communities in Persian and Chinese cities, their faith preserved on ancient stone markers found in the Chinese capital of Xi'an. And later, the rise of Islam spread with breathtaking speed, not solely by the sword, but along the well-worn trade routes of the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa. Muslim merchants were often the first to bring their faith to new lands, building mosques in trading ports and desert oases, their reputation for honesty in business making their spiritual message all the more compelling. But the exchange went far beyond religion. Practical, world-altering technologies moved with the caravans. The secret of paper-making, discovered in China, traveled west to Samarkand and then to the Muslim world and Europe, revolutionizing record-keeping and spreading literacy. The humble stirrup, a simple leather loop that gave a mounted warrior unprecedented stability, migrated from East Asia to Europe, forever changing the nature of warfare and giving rise to the age of the knight. Can you picture the scene in a crowded caravanserai at dusk? A musician from Persia might be teaching a new melody on an oud to a traveler from India, a melody that would one day influence the musical traditions of another continent. A cook might trade a handful of strange new spices, introducing flavors that would forever change a region's cuisine. The evidence of this deep mingling is etched into the sand itself. A Buddhist sutra, written in the ancient Indian language of Sanskrit, is discovered in a sealed cave at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. A hoard of Roman coins bearing the faces of forgotten emperors turns up at an ancient port in southern India. These are not isolated curiosities. They are the scattered footprints of a connected world, proving that for centuries the deserts were not barriers, but the great mixing bowls of human culture. Long before our modern age of instant communication, these hidden trade networks were quietly weaving the first threads of a single, global tapestry. A single caravan crossing the desert was a mobile city, a feat of human organization so complex it rivals our most advanced logistics today. Its journey began long before the first camel took a step, with merchants gathering in dusty city squares to negotiate shares in the venture. Each animal represented a significant investment, and its load had to be perfectly balanced, not just for the camel's comfort, but for the caravan's survival. Too much weight on one side could cause a precious water skin to rupture, a disaster in the making. The hiring of personnel was a delicate art. At the top of this hierarchy was the guide, a man whose knowledge was the caravan's most valuable asset. He did not follow a map but carried a mental chart of the desert, memorizing the location of every hidden well, every patch of scrub that could feed the animals, and every distinctive rock formation that served as a landmark. His word was law, for a single wrong turn could lead to a slow, thirsty death for everyone. Alongside him walked the cameleers, each responsible for a string of 5 to 10 animals, tending to their feet, treating their ailments, and ensuring they kept pace. Then there were the guards, often drawn from the very tribes whose territories the caravan would cross. Their presence was a dual guarantee, a deterrent to bandits and a passport of safe passage, purchased through intricate negotiations and the payment of tolls. The caravan moved not as a chaotic mass but in a strict, disciplined formation. Scouts ranged far ahead, searching for signs of danger or shifting dunes. The main body followed in a long, snaking line, with the most valuable cargo placed securely in the center. Travel was a nocturnal affair, a strategic retreat from the sun's tyranny. By day, the caravan would halt, a temporary city springing to life in the shade of makeshift tents. Men would rest while others stood watch, the silence of the desert broken only by the soft grunts of the camels as they chewed their cud. At night, the world transformed. Under a canopy of brilliant, unfamiliar stars, the caravan would press onward, the guide navigating by the steady rotation of constellations, his celestial map the only thing separating the line of men and beasts from oblivion. The true miracle of these journeys was not merely surviving the environment, but the intricate social cooperation they required. A caravan was a temporary alliance of rivals, a floating treaty where different tribes and ethnic groups, who might be in conflict elsewhere, had to work in perfect harmony for the 60 or 90 days of the journey. Their shared goal, to deliver the cargo and reap the profits, overrode ancient grievances. This was international cooperation on a scale the ancient world rarely saw elsewhere, a silent, moving testament to the fact that in the face of the desert's immense indifference, humanity's only hope was to work together. A city swallowed whole by the desert as punishment for its sins sounds like the stuff of pure legend. The story of Ubar, also known as Iram of the Pillars, was passed down for generations, a tale of the powerful Ad people who grew so arrogant and corrupt that they were erased from the earth by a cataclysmic sandstorm. For centuries, it was dismissed as a fable, a moral lesson with no basis in reality. Then, modern technology began to peel back the layers of sand and time. Archaeologists, using radar images from the space shuttle and satellite photos, detected the faint outlines of ancient caravan tracks converging on a single, remote location in Oman's empty quarter, one of the most forbidding deserts on the planet. When they excavated, they found not just a settlement but a fortress city built directly over a massive limestone cavern. This was the key to Ubar's rise and its terrifying fall. The city was a critical hub on the Frankincense trail, and its great wealth was built upon the resin that was more precious than gold. The cavern beneath it, however, was not a stable foundation. It was a fragile, hollow shell. Historians and geologists now believe that the city's grandiose structures, its legendary pillars, simply became too heavy for the ground beneath them. The limestone roof of the cavern collapsed catastrophically, dragging the entire city down into the earth in a chaotic sinkhole, which was then swiftly buried by the encroaching dunes. What ancient storytellers interpreted as divine retribution was likely a dramatic geological disaster. The legend of Ubar serves as a hauntingly precise metaphor. Its prosperity was entirely dependent on a single, volatile trade good, and its physical existence was literally undermined by the very source of its power. This is the recurring nightmare of any civilization that puts all its faith in one resource, building its pillars of wealth upon a foundation that cannot last. While the Silk Road dominates our imagination, another legendary route carved its own path through the roof of the world. Deep in the mountains and high deserts of southwestern China, the Tea Horse Road operated for centuries as a lifeline of equal importance, yet it remains a shadowy rival in the history books. Its name reveals the simple, powerful logic of its trade. From the fertile hills of Yunnan and Sichuan, caravans carried compressed bricks of dark tea, a commodity the Chinese had in abundance. Their destination was the high plateau of Tibet, where the thin, oxygen-starved air and meat-heavy diet of the people created a desperate physiological need for tea. The vitamins and compounds in the fermented leaves were not a luxury, they were a vital necessity for survival. In return, the Tibetans offered the one thing their rugged land produced in magnificent quality: strong, sturdy warhorses, bred for endurance in the high altitude. These animals were not for ceremony, they were the backbone of the Chinese military, essential for defending the empire's sprawling frontiers. This was a trade built on mutual, non-negotiable need. The route itself was a testament to human determination, crossing some of the most treacherous terrain on the planet. Caravans, often led by sure-footed mules rather than camels, had to navigate narrow paths cut into the sides of sheer mountain cliffs, swaying rope bridges over raging rivers, and high-altitude deserts where the very air was thin and punishing. A single journey could take half a year, with porters carrying staggering loads on their backs, their progress measured in painful, careful steps. This relentless flow did more than move goods, it wove a tight cultural tapestry. In the bustling relay stations and market towns along the way, Han Chinese merchants lived alongside Tibetan tribes, their languages and customs blending into a unique hybrid culture. Tibetan Buddhism took root in Chinese regions, while Chinese agricultural techniques and building styles spread into Tibetan valleys. This constant, gritty interaction was far more than simple commerce. It was a slow, deliberate process of integration, binding the remote, often rebellious regions of Yunnan and Sichuan firmly into the broader Chinese economic and cultural sphere. The silent, mist-shrouded gorges of the Tea Horse Road hold a profound lesson. They remind us that history is not made by a single, famous route, but by multiple, simultaneous networks, each answering a different, urgent human need, and in doing so, quietly shaping the fate of nations. The Phoenicians proved that the desert and the sea were never separate worlds. While their fleets of sturdy ships are legendary, their true genius lay in connecting the deep ocean to the deepest desert. From their famed coastal cities of Tyre and Sidon, they looked not only westward across the Mediterranean, but also eastward into the vast and arid expanse of the Arabian desert. They understood that the legendary frankincense and myrrh, the lifeblood of ancient empires, originated in those distant, sun-scorched highlands. So they built not just ports, but entire overland trading posts, creating a relay system that brought the sacred resins from the interior of Arabia to their waiting ships on the coast. This mastery of dual routes gave them an unparalleled advantage. They could move goods across the sea with unequaled skill, and then penetrate the desert with the same strategic precision. Their influence did not stop at the shoreline. Their most famous colony, Carthage, on the North African coast, grew into a power in its own right. From there, Carthaginian explorers and merchants pushed south, forging the earliest documented trade links across the Sahara. They traded goods with the peoples of the desert's far side, establishing a network that would later be dominated by others, but which they pioneered. This interconnected system, from the Arabian incense trails to the trans-Saharan caravans, required more than just brave sailors and hardy camels. It demanded a revolution in communication. The cumbersome pictographic writing systems of the great river empires were useless for the fast-paced, multilingual world of commerce. A merchant in Tyre needed to send a clear, quick order to his agent in a dusty desert outpost. The solution was one of humanity's most transformative inventions, the phonetic alphabet. By creating a simple set of symbols that represented sounds instead of complex ideas, the Phoenicians gave the ancient world a tool for efficient record-keeping and contracts. This was not an invention for poets or priests, it was a tool for traders. It allowed for clarity across cultures, turning spoken agreements into written records that could be understood by anyone who learned the system, regardless of their native tongue. This humble commercial tool would be adopted and adapted by the Greeks, and later the Romans, becoming the very foundation of our own writing system today. So when you look at the letters on this screen, you are seeing a direct legacy of Phoenician merchants, men who needed a better way to track shipments of incense and cloth, a system born from the practical demands of linking the desert to the sea. Gold and salt built more than empires, they constructed entire universities. Far from the Mediterranean centers of learning, a different kind of intellectual powerhouse emerged at the crossroads of the Sahara. Timbuktu was not merely a city of merchants, but a vibrant oasis of the mind. Its wealth, flowing directly from the trans-Saharan trade, funded an astonishing number of private libraries and universities, like the renowned Sankor Mosque, which functioned as a world-class institution. Scholars journeyed for months to reach its gates, drawn from as far away as Cairo and Baghdad, to debate and study alongside local African thinkers. This was not a small, isolated school, but a true international hub where the great intellectual traditions of the Islamic world engaged with deep local knowledge. The output of this collaboration was staggering. Scribes produced hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, each one handwritten with meticulous care. These were not just religious texts, but advanced treatises on astronomy that mapped the stars for desert navigation, medical texts detailing complex surgical procedures and herbal remedies, and legal commentaries that structured a just society. They were written primarily in Arabic, the Latin of its day, but also in local African languages using the Arabic script, creating a unique literary fusion. A single family library might hold thousands of these volumes, passed down through generations as the most precious of heirlooms. The value of a caravan's cargo was measured not just in gold, but in the knowledge it could help purchase or produce. A merchant's profit might fund the copying of a rare Greek philosophical text that had made its way to the desert, or pay for the paper and ink for a local scholar to write a groundbreaking history of the Mali Empire. The very paper these manuscripts were written on was itself a product of long-distance trade, often imported from as far away as Italy or Spain. This incredible intellectual flourishing forces us to rethink the very purpose of these trade networks. They were a circulatory system for the world's knowledge, carrying ideas that were considered as precious and as trade-worthy as any bolt of silk or sack of pepper. The libraries of Timbuktu stood as a quiet, powerful testament to a simple truth, that in the right conditions, the wealth of commerce can be transformed directly into the light of understanding, creating a beacon that shone far brighter than any earthly treasure. The true enemy of these mighty trade networks was not rival empires or bandits, but a far less predictable force. A changing climate could dismantle centuries of human connection with a slow, indifferent hand. The story of the Garamantes, who mastered the art of mining ancient water, ends not with a battle but with a whisper. Their vast underground aquifers were not a renewable spring but a finite treasure, a bathtub that could never be refilled. After generations of drawing from this deep well, the water table sank beyond reach. Their intricate Fagara tunnels, a marvel of engineering, began to choke with sand, and the green fields that had defied the desert slowly turned to dust. Their civilization did not fall to an invader, it simply withered from thirst. This pattern repeated itself across the ancient world. A subtle but relentless process of desertification could transform a vital oasis into a barren salt pan over a few generations. Caravan routes that had been reliable for 1,000 years became treacherous death traps as wells ran dry and familiar landmarks vanished beneath shifting dunes. A single lost water source could force a detour of hundreds of miles, making a trade route economically impossible. The change was not always slow. On the coasts of southern Arabia, entire trading kingdoms like Kana, which had grown rich from the frankincense trade, faced a different climatic threat. Their prosperity depended on predictable monsoon winds to power the ships that carried their precious resin north. A lasting shift in these weather patterns could mean that sailing ships could no longer reliably reach their ports. The incense might still flow, but if the sea lanes closed, the economic heart of the kingdom would simply stop beating. These are not just stories of the past. They are powerful reminders that the grandest human ambitions are built upon a foundation of environmental stability. The networks that moved ideas and wealth across continents were as fragile as a consistent rainfall or a predictable wind. Our own world, with its complex global supply chains, is not so different. We too depend on stable climates and reliable resources. The silent ruins of cities swallowed by sand stand as a stark monument to a simple, humbling truth. No matter how brilliant our engineering or how vast our wealth, we are always, ultimately, guests in a natural world that holds the final card. This spice trade was a monopoly built on secrets whispered by the wind. Arab merchants did not just possess spices, they held the key to the seasonal rhythms of the Indian Ocean. They mastered the monsoon winds, understanding that for half the year these powerful gusts would blow their sturdy D-house southeast toward the spice ports of India and the East Indies. Then, as the seasons turned, the winds would reverse, faithfully carrying those same ships, now laden with precious cargo, back to the Arabian coast. This was a calendar written in the sky and sea, a schedule that dictated the entire flow of wealth. In bustling ports like Aden and Muscat, the air grew thick with the scent of distant lands. Sacks of black pepper from the Malabar coast, fragrant cinnamon from Ceylon, and delicate cloves from far-off islands were unloaded onto the docks. This was where the journey transformed. The spices were packed tightly into waterproof leather bags and loaded onto the backs of waiting camels, beginning the long, arduous trek north. Caravans snaked their way through the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, following routes that had been used for frankincense a millennium before. They moved through the territories of powerful middlemen, each taking a cut, each adding to the final price. By the time a pound of pepper reached a merchant in Alexandria or Constantinople, its value had multiplied 100-fold. For medieval Europe, these spices were not mere luxuries. In an age before refrigeration, pepper preserved meat and masked the taste of spoilage. Cloves and cinnamon were vital for medicines and perfumes. They were fundamental to daily life and social status, and Europe's entire supply was filtered through this single, costly desert pipeline. This control over both geographical knowledge and the physical routes created immense wealth for the caliphates and sultanates of the Middle East, a wealth that seemed unshakable. Yet this very monopoly contained the seeds of its own destruction. European princes and merchants gazing east saw only a frustrating and expensive barrier. The desperate need to bypass this desert-held gateway to find a direct sea route to the spice sources would eventually push ships over the edge of the known world. The age of exploration, with all its monumental consequences, was born from a simple, powerful desire to circumvent the ancient trade routes of the desert. South of Egypt's Grand Pyramids, another desert power forged its own path to greatness. The kingdom of Kush did not merely exist in the shadow of its famous neighbor. it mastered the harsh Nubian desert corridor, turning a challenging landscape into a source of immense power. The Nile was their lifeline, but the surrounding deserts were their strategic shield. This was not a remote outpost, it was a sophisticated kingdom whose wealth was legendary, built on a resource that never lost its allure: gold. The deserts of Kush were rich with it, and this golden bounty flowed north, financing the ambitions of the pharaohs and later filling the coffers of Rome. But their caravans carried more than just precious metal. They brought dark, lustrous ebony wood, prized for furniture and sacred objects, gleaming ivory from the African interior, and exotic animals like giraffes and monkeys for the royal menageries of the Mediterranean world. This control over the flow of African riches gave them incredible leverage, so much so that around 744 years before the Common Era, the Kushites did the unthinkable: they reversed the flow of power. They conquered Egypt itself, ruling as the 25th dynasty, the famed Black Pharaohs. For nearly a century, they presided over a united Nile Valley, restoring ancient traditions and commissioning their own monumental pyramids, which still stand in modern Sudan. Their story is a profound lesson in strategic positioning. They were not defined by the marginal desert environment they inhabited, but by how brilliantly they leveraged it. They controlled the only reliable route for the treasures of Inner Africa to reach the Mediterranean, and in doing so, they ensured their kingdom would be an essential player on the world stage for over 1,000 years. A civilization flourishing in the desert's embrace did not just survive, it conquered the very empires that once overshadowed it. The desert's silence was a canvas for the human imagination, where the very real fear of getting lost transformed into tales of spectral jinn. These desert spirits did not simply haunt the dunes. They were believed to mimic the voices of loved ones or create phantom oases of shimmering water, leading entire caravans to wander off the established path and into a sandy grave. This is the desert's echo of the sirens from Greek mythology, those beautiful yet deadly creatures whose songs lured sailors onto rocky coasts. In both traditions, the deepest fear was the same: the terror of being seduced away from the safe, known route by an illusion you desperately wanted to believe was real. These stories were a powerful form of oral navigation, warning every merchant and cameleer to trust the stars and the seasoned guide, not the tempting mirage. Another legend born from the spice routes is the magnificent phoenix, the bird that cyclically dies in a flash of flame only to be reborn from its own ashes. The origin of this myth is deeply tied to the trade in cinnamon and other aromatic barks. Ancient sources like the Greek historian Herodotus recorded a fantastical tale told by Arab spice merchants. They claimed that cinnamon grew in deep, treacherous ravines guarded by giant birds. To collect it, traders would leave out large pieces of meat. The great birds would carry the meat back to their nests, which were built from cinnamon sticks. The weight would cause the nests to collapse, sending the precious cinnamon tumbling down to where it could be gathered. This story of a bird intimately connected to a rare and fragrant substance, one that built its home from the spice itself, likely evolved over countless campfires into the more universal symbol of death and rebirth that we know today. These myths were far more than simple entertainment around a desert campfire. They were the psychological framework ancient people used to process the immense dangers and wonders of their world. The story of a jinn explained why a skilled guide might suddenly lead his party astray, absolving him of blame and attributing the error to a supernatural, unpredictable force. The tale of the phoenix, born from the spice trade, gave a magical, heroic context to the origin of goods that must have seemed miraculous to those who had never seen the lands they came from. Every strange sound in the night, every unexplained disappearance, every rare and wonderful product found its place in a story. In this way, the collective experience of the merchant, the profound loneliness, the constant risk, and the awe of encountering the truly exotic became woven directly into the cultural DNA of civilizations, turning the map of trade routes into a landscape of living legend. The silent depths of the sea can hold as many secrets as the shifting desert sands. Off the rugged coast of Turkey, the discovery of the Uluburun shipwreck offered a stunning time capsule from the late Bronze Age. This was not just an old ship, it was a floating microcosm of the entire ancient world. Its cargo held raw materials and finished goods from at least a dozen different civilizations. There were copper ingots from Cyprus, tin from Central Asia, beautiful Canaanite jewelry, ebony logs from Inner Africa, and even a golden scarab inscribed with the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. This single vessel proves that 3,000 years ago, a truly globalized trade network was already in operation, connecting empires from the Nile to the Aegean in a complex web of exchange. These merchants were not just coastal hoppers, they were international wholesalers. Far to the east, in the arid Tarim Basin, the desert's dry air performed a different kind of miracle, preserving the dead with breathtaking clarity. The mummies of Churchen and other oasis sites have sparked a quiet revolution in our understanding. These individuals, buried for millennia, have striking European features and wear brightly colored woolen textiles that look like they were woven just yesterday. Their very existence rewrites the map of early human movement, proving that people from the West had penetrated deep into Central Asia thousands of years earlier than previously believed. They were not isolated wanderers, but part of communities that lived, traded, and intermarried along these early corridors of contact, long before the Silk Road was given a name. Every shovelful of sand turned at a forgotten caravanserai, every hoard of coins found far from its mint, adds another vital piece to this vast, interconnected puzzle. A single Roman coin in southern India speaks of a merchant's long journey. A shred of Chinese silk in a London archaeological dig tells a story of countless hands passing a treasure across continents. These physical objects are the undeniable evidence that the written records, often focused on kings and conquests, only tell part of the story. The real narrative of human connection is written in the humble artifacts of everyday commerce, waiting for us to dig them up and listen. The wealth that flowed from a single trade route could literally build a kingdom from the sand. Controlling a choke point like the Incense Road or the Saharan gold trails was not just profitable, it was transformative. The immense tax revenues collected from passing caravans funded ambitions on a staggering scale. Kings commissioned towering temples and sprawling palaces that would have been impossible without this endless stream of capital. They became patrons of the arts, filling their courts with poets, musicians, and scholars whose work defined their cultural legacy. This wealth also paid for professional, well-equipped armies that could project power far beyond the desert's edge, securing the very routes that made them rich. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of prosperity, where commerce funded the security that, in turn, protected the commerce. But this glittering system had a fatal flaw. A kingdom's entire identity could become shackled to a single economic lifeline. Its population, its prestige, and its very survival depended on the uninterrupted flow of goods. This created a profound and dangerous vulnerability. The collapse could be shockingly swift. If a rival power opened a new maritime route, as the Romans did to bypass the Nabateans, the caravans would simply stop coming. If a valuable commodity like frankincense was discovered in a new territory outside of a kingdom's control, its monopoly, and thus its wealth, would vanish. Internal political strife could make a route too dangerous for merchants, who would then seek a safer path. The story of Palmyra is a textbook example of this fragility. For centuries, it thrived as a neutral oasis of commerce, its wealth insulating it from the great empires around it. But when its ambitious queen Zenobia attempted to challenge Rome directly, she overplayed her hand. The Roman legions did not just defeat her army, they systematically redirected the trade that was the city's lifeblood. Without that economic heartbeat, Palmyra's grandeur faded within a generation, its magnificent columns left to the desert wind. This economic lens reveals a sobering truth about these vanished kingdoms. Their dazzling rise was funded by a river of gold, but their sudden disappearance was often just a matter of that river changing its course. The very specialization that made them rich also made them exquisitely sensitive to any shift in the currents of global trade. The lines on a modern map tell a story written by ancient caravans. Many borders in North Africa and the Middle East were not drawn arbitrarily, but directly over the ghostly footprints of these old trade paths. The strategic locations of capital cities and the very shapes of nations often conform to the logic of a forgotten economic geography, where control over an oasis or a mountain pass meant everything. This historical inheritance now fuels contemporary struggles. The relentless competition for oil and natural gas in these arid regions is a direct echo of the ancient battles to control the flow of gold and salt. It is the same strategic game played with different resources. The critical importance of fresh water, a source of conflict from the time of the Garamantes to today, underscores a timeless truth that life in the desert has always been a negotiation with scarcity. To understand the complex web of alliances and tensions that define this part of the world, you must look beneath the sand. The deep-seated rivalries between nomadic tribes and settled states, the enduring importance of a port like Aden or a strait like Hormuz, all of these modern realities are rooted in patterns of movement and exchange that are thousands of years old. The past is not a separate country here. It is the very bedrock upon which the present is built, a foundation of invisible roads that still guide the destiny of nations. The night sky was their compass, and the desert itself their only map. Ancient traders navigated these vast, empty spaces with a skill that seems almost supernatural to us today. They were not just merchants, they were master astronomers, reading the heavens with a precision that guided them unerringly for months on end. In the northern hemisphere, the North Star, Polaris, was their fixed point, an unmoving beacon around which all other stars slowly turned. By measuring its angle above the horizon, a skilled guide could calculate his latitude, knowing exactly how far north or south he had traveled. But their celestial knowledge went far deeper than a single star. They memorized the seasonal rise and set of constellations, using them as a cosmic calendar to time their departures and arrivals. The position of the Southern Cross, for instance, was vital for caravans moving below the equator. This was not a casual glance upward, it was a rigorous, lifelong study, a science etched into memory under countless nights of clear desert sky. By day, when the stars vanished, the desert itself provided the clues. A seasoned guide could read the language of the sand dunes. He knew that their shape and alignment, sculpted by the prevailing winds, told a consistent story of direction. The gentle, windward slope of a dune always faced one way, while the steeper, leeward slip face pointed in the opposite direction. He would observe the sparse, hardy vegetation, knowing that certain plants only grew in specific soil conditions, hinting at the proximity of a hidden water table. Even the color and texture of the sand grains could change subtly, indicating a transition from one ancient seabed to another, a ghostly geography visible only to the initiated. The direction of the wind, the types of birds flying overhead, even the way rocks were weathered by sandstorms, all of it formed a living, breathing map. This intimate sensory relationship with the environment was their true technology. It was a cumulative wisdom passed from father to son, refined over countless journeys and paid for with the lives of those who misread the signs. This deep knowledge transformed a terrifying void into a familiar, if demanding, highway. It makes you wonder, with all our satellites and digital maps, what profound languages of the natural world have we forgotten how to speak? From the Sahara's golden caravans to the Gobi's nomadic empires, a single truth echoes across the sand. Our world has always been profoundly connected, woven together by these hidden arteries of trade. These networks were far more than simple commercial routes. They were the vital sinews that bound ancient civilizations into a single, breathing organism. They allowed for the exchange of the very foundations of culture, the shared knowledge and beliefs that define who we are. The lost deserts we once imagined as empty voids were, in reality, pulsing with life and commerce. The vanished kingdoms were not isolated curiosities, but active, vibrant participants in a global dialogue that stretched for thousands of miles. They specialized, they innovated, and they communicated, all through the delicate, resilient threads of these trade routes. Remembering these intricate connections does more than just fill in blank spaces on a historical map. It gives us a deeper, more nuanced understanding of our shared human story. A story not of separation, but of constant, determined exchange. It reveals an enduring drive within us all, a need to reach beyond our own horizon, to trade, to talk, and to connect, no matter how vast or how silent the desert in between may seem.